In today's video, we're going to be talking about the states with the worst mental health here in the United States. And this is according to recent numbers from the, get this, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. That is a mouthful, and we also got some information from the U.S. Census. We all know this country has an ugly amount of people suffering from mental illness living on the streets. What most people don't understand is about 32 times more are not living unhoused. It is like an epidemic in this country right now, and there's a lot of theories, a lot of reasons, and even more conspiracy theories about why this is. My theory is pop rocks and soda. I think back in the 70s and 80s, that stuff really screwed us up. That's just me though. I have no proof, logical thoughts, or reasonable explanation to back this up, just like most conspiracy theories. But there are some factors that contribute to poor mental health here in the United States, including poverty, lack of access to healthcare, high rates of unemployment, crime and violence, discrimination, social isolation, and of course, years of substance abuse. Which in some cases, mental health has something to do with why they got on substances. Now, like everything, some states, some cities are worse than others when it comes to this subject. Today, we're looking at the 10 worst. If you live in one of these states or any state and you're dealing with some mental health issues, remember, you're not alone. There are resources available to help you get the mental health care you need. You can find a list of some of these resources in the description below. And if you call one of these organizations or you get in touch with them, maybe they're not in your area, I promise you they will get you in touch with the people in your area you need to talk to. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Idaho. Idaho's never seemed like a place that would put much effort into their residents' mental well-being. They seem to be more focused on hunting, fishing, keeping Californians out, and figuring out an easy way to let Eastern Oregon know they don't want them to join their state. Idaho has a lot of stats when it comes to mental health that aren't great, but two that stuck out to me have to do with youth. They rank 7th and 8th worst in the nation for two metrics that evaluate access to mental health treatment for youths. When it comes to youths that had depressive episodes in the past year, 66% didn't receive any mental health treatment, and they rank 7th when it comes to the percentage of children with health insurance that doesn't cover emotional or mental problems, 11.9%. Idaho is also one of the states that has the highest rate for health insurance. But if you do need to talk to someone in the state of Idaho, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, there's a link for that down below. But 4.69% of Idaho's population is dealing with some sort of mental issue. That's not the number we're going by. This is just kind of an overall thing from each state that ranks them. Number 9, Arizona. Arizona, you would think, would be a place where everybody's happy. Sunshine all the time, a lot of open spaces, horrible air quality in the summer, tourists calling their lizards Gila monsters and not Gila monsters. But here they are at number 9. They are dealing with some good old-fashioned mental issues. Now, the reason I say they should be happy is the sunshine gives you vitamin D. Vitamin D affects your mood. That's why up here in the Pacific Northwest, they tell everyone, take vitamin D. You're not getting enough of it from the sun. Arizona also had two metrics that they did very poorly in. The state has the 4th highest percentage of youths who've had a major depressive episode in the past year and didn't receive medical treatment, 70.1%. Almost 18% of Arizona's adults have had some kind of mental crisis in the last year. They have over 220,000 adults living with some form of severe mental illness. Arizona also has the 10th largest percentage of children with private health insurance that doesn't cover mental or emotional problems at 10.2%. 4.79% of Arizona's population deals with some form of mental illness. Number 8, Wyoming. Wyoming, they've got a lot of things going on up there. I mean, beautiful land, rugged, windy, a bunch of guns, and a lot of mental illness. They've got a whole bunch of stats that got them on this list. A lot of it has to do with isolation. This is not a very populous state. There's not a lot of people living here. Wyoming is the 10th largest state, and it ranks 50th in population, 49th in population density. There are a lot of lonely people in this state. Wyoming is one of the worst when it comes to adults with any mental illness who did not receive mental health treatment in the past year, 61.7% of them. They also have one of the highest percentage of adults with any mental illness who are uninsured with 18%. They're also one of the highest when it comes to adults with cognitive disability who could not see a doctor in the past 12 months. That's 32.9% of them. Overall, 5.19% of Wyoming is dealing with some sort of mental illness. Number 7, Tennessee. I've known Tennessee has been dealing with mental health issues for years. I get emails all the time from residents trying to tell me that Memphis isn't as bad as the stats say it is. I always reply with the same thing. I've been to Memphis many times, and you have a better chance of convincing me Colorado has oceanfront property than you do of getting me to believe Memphis is a safe place to hang out. Tennessee has the 7th lowest rate of mental health treatment centers nationwide. They have 49.2 for every 10,000 businesses. This is important because a lot of people dealing with mental issues such as stress and depression, it's job related. The percentage of adults with any mental illness who are uninsured in Tennessee is 15.3%. And youths that had a major depressive episode in the past year and did not receive mental health treatment, it's 66%. 5.2% of Tennessee's residents deal with some form of mental illness. Number 6, South Carolina. If you live in the low country of South Carolina, which is essentially on the coast, your chances of dealing with depression are much lower than the rest of the state. I've been to South Carolina quite a few times, and trust me, the low country is so much better than the rest of the state. Greenville isn't that bad, that whole area there. Simpsonville is decent. I could really do without the rest of the state. And I think most of the residents could do without it also. South Carolina has the lowest number of mental health treatment centers compared to all other states. They only have 30.8 for every 10,000 businesses. They also have the 6th highest percentage of youths who had a major depressive episode in the past year that didn't receive mental health with 67%, and they have the highest number of adults who believe the South won the Civil War. 5.42% of South Carolina's population deals with mental illness. Number 5, Florida. The only thing that surprises me here is it's not number 1. I mean, those memes about Florida, man, aren't about the most relatively stable dudes in the country. And these, stereotypes just don't fall out of the sky. A few years back, I read a story about this guy that was stealing trees out of people's front yards and planting them in his own. This is the worst thing. They were small trees. He could do it by himself, but he was doing this on his own block. So he'd go down 2 doors, take a small tree out of someone's yard in the middle of the night, plant it in his yard that night, and was surprised when the police came and arrested him. The worst part about it was he had been confronted on this, and people had taken their trees back, and he had continued to do this. I don't know what he was dealing with, but I'm sure it fell into one of the categories here. Florida is tied with its neighbor to the north, Georgia, for having the 2nd highest percentage of adults with mental illness who didn't receive treatment the past year. It's 63.5%. More than 1/3 of Florida's adults with cognitive disability could not see a doctor in the past 12 months due to cost, which is the 5th or 6th highest in the nation, depending on what study you look at. 4.72% of Florida's population deals with some form of mental illness. Like I said before, we're not ranking them by that number. It's overall where they fall. Number 4, Georgia. Like I said before, Georgia is tied with Florida for having the 2nd highest percentage of adults with a mental illness who didn't receive mental health treatment within the past year. It's 63.5%. Georgia is also way up there with the percentage of youths with major depression episodes in the past year that didn't receive mental health treatment, 67.8%. And when you look at that cognitive disability for adults, they're the 2nd highest for not seeing a doctor within the past 12 months at 39%. 4.89% of Georgia's population deals with mental illness. Number 3, Mississippi. Is there anything they don't just knock out of the park when it's negative? I mean, think about it. It's Mississippi. They're always in the top 5 when it comes to poverty. They have by far the worst state capital. My favorite stat is they have one of the highest percentage of the population that has to hunt or fish for food on a weekly basis. I mean, that's great if you're sports fishing. You bring home a bunch of bass or some trout and you eat it maybe that night and then, but these people actually depend on it. Back in the 1800s, even in the early 20th century, that was acceptable, not in 2023. It's one thing to enjoy it, another thing to depend on it. Mississippi is really killing it when it comes to the number of mental health treatment centers. When I say killing it, they're really not doing that good. 36 for every 10,000 businesses. And the percentage of youths that had a major depressive episode in the past year that did not receive treatment, 71%. 5.89% of Mississippi's population deals with mental illness. Number 2, Alabama. You know, I've always found Alabama to be it's a strange place. You know, it's either hot or cold. It's either really good or really bad. Some of the nicest people you will ever meet in the world, you'll find in Alabama, or they'll find you. They're that friendly. You have great cities like Huntsville, and then you got Mobile. They've had athletes like Jesse Owens, and they've also had Butterbean. But Alabama has the second highest percentage of adults with mental illness who are uninsured at 20%. Alabama also has the third lowest number of mental health treatment centers nationwide, 38 for every 10,000 businesses. And more than 1/3 of adults with cognitive disabilities could not see a doctor in the past 12 months due to cost. Alabama has the 6th highest percentage of children with private health insurance that does not cover mental or emotional problems, about 12.5%. 4.96% of Alabama's residents deal with mental illness. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. That one is slowly growing. We're hoping to grow it more, so go on over and subscribe. I'll be your best friend. There's a link in the description area below. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Texas. Yeah, another shocker. Texas, you know, they always seem like they got it together with a lot of different things. Usually these days, people just associate seeing a whole bunch of homeless people as having a whole bunch of mental issues because we all know they're either dealing with mental illness or they're dealing with some kind of substance abuse, 70% of the time. Texas isn't overrun with homeless, which I found strange when I went to Austin and San Antonio recently. I expect to see a lot more because that's usually a situation when you have decent weather. And I mean, it gets terribly hot, but those cities rarely freeze and have a foot of snow, Texas has the highest percentage of adults with any mental illness that are uninsured at 21.5%. Texas is the worst state for mental health care, period. That's what the study found. Texas is also home to the highest percentage of adults with cognitive disability who could not see a doctor due to cost, 40% of them. And they also have the highest percentage of youths that had a major depression episode in the past year and did not receive treatment at 73%. They also have the 5th lowest number of mental health treatment centers in the nation with 42 for every 10,000 businesses. 5.29% of Texans deal with mental illness. Now that's coming from the CDC and other government entities. There are private places, research, whatever, usually organizations that deal with mental health and stuff like that, they always seem to have numbers that are a little higher. I saw one that said Texas had like 12% are dealing with mental illness and, like Alabama had like 11%. So a lot of them came out as doubled. All right, everyone, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, be nice to each other.